What usually comes to mind when you hear the word stewardship? Well, time, talent, and treasure. I want to share a story with you that I asked about, 4 or 5 years ago to a leader, and their story, their response was encouraging, it was inspiring, and I want to share it with you. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss it. Well, hey everybody, I appreciate you tuning in to this week's video. I love to share stories, I love to ask questions, and stewardship is something that I think is something we underestimate sometimes. You know, we can steward time, talent, treasure, but there's so many areas. If you start writing down all the things that we could steward our thoughts, we could steward our attitudes, our relationships. We could all do better, right? But there's a story I want to share with you that I think is going to encourage and inspire you and hopefully get you to reflect on some things that are in your hands right now that you might actually think are insignificant. And I just want to encourage you to whatever it is, to steward with excellence. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on an appointment. I was living in Sacramento at the time, and I was meeting somebody at their house. I'd never talked to them, didn't know anything about them, and when I walked in, I saw a bunch of NBA memorabilia on the wall. And so I figured, well, there's some connection there. And after our business had wrapped up, I asked this question. I said, hey, tell me about a time where you stewarded something well, like you were a good steward, but what you were stewarding you thought was insignificant. Like, tell me what happened. Like, tell me about something that developed from that. And the story that he shared just blew me away. So he was working as a principal, I think it was in the 70s. I don't know the exact timeline, and it's been a few years since I heard the story, so I'm gonna do my best to share it with you. But I believe it was in the 70s. This gentleman was working as a principal. He got a phone call asking if he would coach 7th and 8th grade basketball. I think it was boys basketball. It was right in that age range. And he did not want to do it. And I think he actually turned it down maybe even a couple times, and they kept coming back to them. The coach that was set up to coach backed out, or something happened, and these boys had nobody to coach them. And so he said, all right, I'll do it. He did not want to do it, but he did it. And after the first season, apparently he enjoyed it and started, came back the next season, and then the next season, and the next season. And this man just began to steward this coaching position where he was pouring into these kids, and he developed a love for it. And years went by, I don't know the timeline, but one of his previous athletes that he coached was an adult and was older now. And they had this wild idea, and they thought, what if we could bring professional sports to Sacramento? So they came together and they created an association, and they were the ones that actually brought the Sacramento Kings, or the Kings, to Sacramento. Now that franchise has a longer history. I don't know the whole backstory. I think they moved around some different states, but because that gentleman said yes to something he didn't want to do, that he thought wasn't very significant, but because he was a good steward, it just created this love for the game, created relationships with one of his athletes, and they came together, and they are the ones that brought the Kings to Sacramento, and they started that franchise. And so what an incredible, it only makes sense in reverse, like hearing that story. There's things that we're stewarding right now, probably maybe not with the best attitude or with excellence, but if we would actually just take hold of what's in our hand and do a good job, or do a great job, like, who knows what that could turn into. My wife was sharing a quote. I thought it was really timely, and I wanted to share it with you. It was from Christine Kane. And I don't have the quote in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase that too. But essentially what the quote says is, if you will steward what God has put in your hand, then He will trust you to steward what's in your heart. And I just want to encourage you, whatever is in your hands right now, whatever the relationships, the job, the business, the position, the serving, whatever that might be, do it with excellence, do it with a good attitude, because you just never know what may come about from that. If you have a story that is kind of along these lines of something that you're walking in right now, like you're walking in some kind of breakthrough because of something that you were a good steward of, please leave that story in the comments, whether it's a video or whether you type it out. I love to hear the testimonies because this is something that I am trying to do a better job of myself, always trying to get better, and I hope this story encourages you to do the same. Hope you have a blessed day. I appreciate you listening in. We'll talk to you next week.